I never thought I'd turn against my own family, but after what they said to me, I snapped. I've done something that can't be undone, and now they're the ones living in fear. My mom looked me dead in the eye and said, "We're only inviting you out of pity, so don't stay too long." For a second, I froze, glass halfway to my lips. Her words rang in my ears like someone had just slammed a door shut in my face. At first, I thought maybe I misheard her. Maybe the background chatter, the clinking of crystal glasses, the faint hum of jazz spilling from the speakers had twisted her words into something crueler than she meant. But then, my sister laughed. Not a light-hearted laugh either. No, this was sharp, quick, cutting. Like a gavel cracking down in a courtroom. And just like that, I knew. I hadn't misheard. My mother leaned back in her chair with the ease of someone who believed the world would always orbit around her. Her manicured fingers rested lazily on the back of my sister's chair, her diamond bracelet catching the chandelier's glow with a flash that felt almost mocking. She didn't even look at me again. To her, I was dismissed, an afterthought. Like swatting away a fly that had overstayed its welcome. I could feel eyes on me. My brother's wife. That smug, measuring look she always gave me. Like she was appraising a piece of furniture she already decided wasn't worth keeping. My brother, of course, played right into it. One arm draped around her shoulders, the other raising his glass of overpriced scotch. He smirked as if to say, "Yeah, we're all in on the joke." His watch caught the light as he tilted his drink, a little display of wealth, subtle but intentional. All of them. Every single one of them. I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. Instead, I smiled. A slow, deliberate smile. I lifted my glass and let the whiskey burn down my throat, warming me from the inside. What was there to say? I'd heard digs like this all my life, snide remarks dressed up in jokes, subtle little cuts slipped between compliments. Once upon a time, I used to let it eat me alive. I used to think if I just tried harder, maybe I'd finally earn their respect. But that hope had died years ago. I set my glass down on the bar with a soft clink, the polished mahogany gleaming under the lights. I let my eyes wander across the room. The house was just as I remembered it, perfectly curated furniture, carefully placed artwork, every detail screaming of control, of image. Once it had felt like home. Now it felt like I was wandering through a museum exhibit, except I didn't belong here anymore. Without another word, I slipped out. The laughter followed me faintly until the heavy side door closed behind me. Outside, the night air was cold and sharp, cutting at my lungs as I exhaled. My footsteps echoed against the stone path leading to the driveway. My phone buzzed in my pocket, probably some meaningless group text from my sister about an upcoming birthday or holiday brunch. I didn't even check. Sliding into my car, I gripped the leather steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My mother's voice replayed in my head, "Pity, don't stay too long," and each time, the bitterness settled deeper, simmering like a slow boil. But mixed in with the anger was something else. Something colder. A strange, powerful clarity. They wanted me to be the black sheep? The family disappointment? Fine. I'd give them exactly that. But it would be on my terms. And I wasn't going to just sit quietly and accept the scraps anymore. By the time I pulled into the driveway of my apartment, a plan had already taken root. Not something rash. Not a quick outburst they could laugh off later. No, this would be careful. Precise. A long game. The kind of slow, methodical unraveling that would pull apart their perfect little world, one thread at a time. The very next morning, I made a call. It was early, maybe too early, but I didn't care. Dan, my attorney, owed me a favor. We'd worked together before, closing a messy real estate deal that most people wouldn't have touched. He was ruthless in all the ways I needed him to be. When he picked up, his voice was groggy, laced with annoyance. "This better be good," he muttered. I smiled. I could almost see him rubbing his temples on the other end of the line. "Hey, Dan," I said, my voice calm, almost cheerful. "Remember that family cabin my parents signed over into my name years ago?" I paused for just a second, savoring the moment. "I think it's time," I continued slowly, "to make a few changes." I didn't waste a single second. The very next morning after that party, I woke up with a pounding headache. But it wasn't from the whiskey, I hadn't had nearly enough for that. No, this ache was from something much heavier. It was the echo of my mother's words, still lodged in my skull like shards of glass. The smug laughter of my siblings. Those tight, mocking smiles they wore like masks. Pity. That was the word that stung the most. That was what they felt for me. Not love. Not respect. Just pity. As if I were some stray they fed out of obligation. A charity case to make themselves look generous. I stumbled out of bed, splashed my face with icy water, and stared at the stranger in the mirror. My jaw was clenched so tightly I could hear the faint grind of my teeth. I walked into the kitchen, dropped into the rickety chair at my little table, and looked at the scratched surface in front of me. Yesterday's junk mail scattered everywhere. A coffee ring dark and permanent, like a stain that refused to be scrubbed away. That table had seen better days, just like me. I grabbed a pen and a half-used notebook, the same one where I jotted down ideas for freelance gigs, and flipped to a blank page. And then I started writing. But this wasn't some bitter rant, not some childish fantasy about getting even. No. This was a plan. Sharp. Cold. Deliberate. The first item, written in big block letters that nearly tore through the paper, sell the cabin. I had almost forgotten about it. The family dacha, the cozy little two-story tucked away on the edge of Lake Marlowe. 2 hours outside the city, but it felt like another world when I was a kid. My grandfather teaching me how to bait a hook, the smell of campfires lingering in my clothes for days, marshmallows so burnt they collapsed in your hands but still tasted like heaven. That cabin held my happiest memories. But somewhere along the line, it had stopped being mine. My parents had turned it into their personal playground. Summer barbecues, long weekends with friends, vacations my siblings got to enjoy while I was left off the guest list. They'd hijacked it the way they hijacked everything else, using it as if it were theirs. But here's the thing, they'd forgotten one detail. The deed was in my name. My grandparents left it to me, not them. And I was done letting loyalty keep me silent. So I pulled out my phone and hit Dan's number. My lawyer. My friend, at least as close to one as I had left. He answered on the third ring, voice still rough with sleep. Tom? What the hell, man, it's not even 8. I leaned back in my chair, the gray morning light spilling weakly through the blinds, painting stripes across my apartment walls. I want to sell the cabin, I said flatly. The one my grandparents left me. There was a pause. I could picture him frowning on the other end, rubbing his temple, already reaching for his coffee. The family place? He asked carefully. Out at Lake Marlowe? I thought your parents were using it. A bitter smile crept across my face. They are. But it's in my name. And I'm done letting them treat it like their summer resort. I want it gone. Quick. Dan hesitated. He'd been to a few of my family's gatherings back in the day. He'd seen the way they operated, the smug comments, the constant power plays. He knew exactly what this meant. Finally, his voice shifted. Professional. Focused. All right. I can make it happen. But we'll need to move quietly, before anyone catches on. That's the plan, I said, already yanking open the drawer of my old filing cabinet. Dust puffed into the air as I rifled through manila folders, flipping past tax returns, utility bills, old receipts. Until, there it was. The deed. Yellowed with age, creased at the corners. I held it up to my nose for a moment, catching the faint cedar scent it had carried since the day my grandparents tucked it into their wooden chest. For the first time in years, I felt like they were standing right beside me, nodding. Approving. The rest of that morning was a blur of scanning documents, double-checking files, signing whatever Dan sent my way. Each click of my pen felt like a nail being hammered into the coffin of their perfect little summer traditions. And I couldn't help but picture it, the scene months from now. My family rolling up in their shiny SUVs, coolers and lawn chairs packed to the brim. Kids spilling out, already squealing about the lake. And then, the look on their faces when they see strangers waving from the porch. Strangers unpacking their own food, their own laughter filling my cabin. Not theirs. By the afternoon, Dan texted me, got everything. I'll list it tomorrow. You sure you're ready for the fallout? I grinned, staring at my cracked phone screen. Ready for the fallout? They had no clue what was coming. This wasn't about cash, though I wasn't about to complain if it padded my account. This was about control. About finally showing them I wasn't some background character in their story. I set the phone down, leaned back in my chair, and let the old wood creak beneath me. The satisfaction was like a slow, deep breath I hadn't taken in years. Then I picked up the pen again, flipped to the next line in my notebook, and wrote my next move in sharp, deliberate strokes, joint accounts. If the cabin was the first domino, this would be the one that toppled everything. This was only the beginning. Selling the cabin? That was just the first crack in their picture-perfect facade. But I wasn't looking for cracks, I wanted the whole structure to collapse. For years I had been their background character, the quiet outsider they dragged along out of obligation. Their convenient punchline. Their pity project. Not anymore. Once the cabin paperwork was out of my hands, I sat down at my desk to plan the next move, the joint accounts. See, my parents had this habit of using me as their extra signature. They slipped me into financial deals like I was a spare tool in their kit. A co-signed car loan when I was still in college. A temporary name on a utility bill. They always called it convenience. What they never mentioned was that some of those accounts were still active years later. But I remembered. Every accidental piece of mail that landed in my tiny apartment mailbox. Every late-night call from a confused banker asking me about accounts I barely knew existed. My name was everywhere in their financial mess, woven in like thread. And if there's one thing I learned growing up in my family, money is their love language. Their obsession. Their altar. So I dug. For hours, I sifted through old emails, bank notifications, scattered statements. Piece by piece, I mapped out their little empire. And sure enough, some of their accounts still lived in my shadow. Checking, utilities, even property taxes on the cabin. All with my name tied neatly to theirs. It was leverage. All the leverage I needed. I called Dan again. He answered faster this time, his tone sharper, awake. Hey, it's me, I said. I need you to dig deeper. I want a full list of every account with my name on it. And I want them closed. Every single one. There was a low whistle on the other end. You're really going for the jugular, huh? This could get messy. I leaned back in my chair, tapping my thumb against the desk in a steady rhythm, like a drumbeat. Messy is fine, I murmured. Just make sure it hurts. And then I waited. Over the next week, I watched the quiet unraveling of their kingdom. Digital notifications pinged on my phone like little sparks of victory. One by one, the threads came loose. First, the joint checking account. A relic from some old car loan my mother had roped me into years ago. She probably forgot it even existed. I didn't. I closed it. Just like that, the balance was transferred into my account. Not much, maybe a few $100s, but it wasn't about the money. It was about control. Next, the property tax account for the cabin. Without my authorization, the automatic payments bounced. Suddenly, their precious summer retreat wasn't so secure. My inbox filled with increasingly frantic emails. My parents begging, demanding, pleading for me to respond. I didn't. 2 days later, my brother texted. His message was short, dripping with that smug superiority he carried like cologne. Hey, Mom and Dad say some of the accounts aren't working. Did you do something? Call them. I let it sit. Left him on read. And I pictured it, the scene I knew was unfolding back at their polished dining room table. The polished mahogany gleaming under the chandelier. Family portraits lining the walls, all those smiling faces frozen in time, silently judging. My mother tapping her manicured nails against her phone, lips pursed in annoyance. My father leaning back in his leather chair, his jaw tight, eyes narrowing as he realized just how much control he no longer had. Meanwhile, I leaned back in my own wobbly chair, the wood creaking beneath me, a slow smile spreading across my face. I picked up my notebook, pen poised, and wrote the next line of my plan: call a lawyer about the will. They thought they were playing a game they'd always win. But they'd underestimated me. They started this war. And I intended to finish it. After the accounts were shut down and the cabin paperwork was signed, I could feel it, the tide was finally turning. I pictured my parents in their pristine living room, everything in its perfect place. My mother clutching her phone like it was a lifeline, her voice sharp and rising as she demanded answers. My father sitting rigid in his leather chair, jaw clenched, his temper simmering beneath the surface while he tried to hold on to that fragile image of control. I didn't need to be there to know how the scene was unfolding. I knew them too well. But I wasn't finished. Not even close. I had one more card to play, one they would never see coming. The will. I had never given it much thought before. Honestly, I always assumed it was simple. Whatever they had would get split among the kids, with my brother, the golden boy, walking away with the lion's share. That's how it always worked. He was the pride. I was the embarrassment. End of story. But after the party? After the cabin? After the accounts? I realized I had an opportunity. I could finally tilt the balance. Maybe even tilt it in my favor. So I dug through my emails until I found it, the contact info for their estate lawyer. Harris. A gray-haired shark who had been attached to my father for years. He was practically family himself, always hovering at barbecues and holidays, nodding politely while my parents bragged about investments, or while my brother basked in the spotlight of his latest accomplishment. I never liked him. His suits were always too perfect, his expression too cold. His eyes carried that thin, disapproving stare that made you feel 2 inches tall. But Harris wasn't loyal. He was a survivor. A man who would drop a client the second it threatened his own reputation. And that made him useful. The next morning, coffee still steaming on my counter, I called him. He answered on the second ring, his voice clipped and professional. Tom, what can I do for you? I leaned against the kitchen counter, eyes drifting to the pigeons pecking crumbs off the fire escape outside my window. Calm. Steady. I want to talk about the will, I said. The family estate. I just want to make sure everything is in order. There was a pause, long enough for me to imagine him straightening in that overpriced leather chair, his pen stilled mid-note. Is there a particular concern you have, Tom? He asked carefully, his tone shifting, testing the waters. Was this a routine check, or the start of a storm? I kept my voice level, almost bored. I just want to make sure my interests are protected. You know, in case there are any surprises down the road. That pause again. I could almost hear the gears grinding in his head, the calculation. Harris was an expert at managing family drama, but even he wasn't immune to unease. Finally, he cleared his throat. I'd like to set up a meeting. We can go over everything, make sure your rights are clear. Perfect, I replied, a small, satisfied smile tugging at my lips. Let's do that. When I hung up, a strange current of adrenaline surged through me. For the first time in years, I wasn't the forgotten one, the passive son, the afterthought. I was the one pulling the strings. I was reshaping their world, one careful move at a time. That night, my phone buzzed. A text from my sister. Mom's freaking out. What's wrong with the cabin? Call me. I didn't. I left her on read, pouring myself another drink instead. The whiskey burned on my tongue, but this time it tasted sweet. I could see them now, my parents and siblings huddled together, their perfect little circle trembling, desperately trying to piece together what was happening. Their carefully built plans unraveling faster than they could patch them. For years, they branded me the black sheep. The failure. The mistake. But now? Now they were finally beginning to understand. This is what happens when you corner someone, and push them too far. And I wasn't done yet. I didn't have to wait long for the fallout. 2 days after my call with Harris, it started. My phone lit up with voicemail after voicemail from my mother. Each one more frantic than the last. The first message was clipped, sharp, every syllable precise, as though she thought she could still command me into obedience. Tom, this is your mother. We need to talk about the cabin. Call me as soon as you get this. Hours later came the second. This time, her voice shook, just barely, like a crack forming in glass. Tom, I don't know what you think you're doing, but this is getting out of hand. You can't just sell the cabin without talking to us. Call me back. Please. And then the third. Her control was gone, shredded. Tom, this is ridiculous. You have to call me. This isn't just your decision. We're family. Family. The word felt like poison on my tongue. I didn't return a single call. I let the red notification bubble on my screen swell with every ignored attempt, each unanswered ring feeding the fire I knew was building in their house. Then my brother tried. 3 missed calls before his patience cracked and he sent a text that was short, furious, and dripping with the same superiority he always wore like cologne. What the hell are you doing, Tom? You're screwing everything up. Call Mom now. I read it twice, sipping my coffee, letting the bitterness coat my tongue as a slow smile spread across my face. The cracks were showing. My pressure points were working. That afternoon, Dan's name popped up on my screen. His text was short, to the point. Offer came in on the cabin. Strong cash buyer. I'm moving forward. My reply was just 2 words. Do it. I leaned back in my chair, closed my eyes, and let the image take over. My family sitting around their spotless dining room table, the polished wood reflecting the chandelier above. My mother pacing, her manicured nails clicking against her phone. My father's face tight with anger as he tried to hold on to the last shreds of control. My siblings whispering, their voices low and sharp, each one desperate to make sense of a situation that had already slipped beyond their grasp. The chaos was building, and I didn't have to lift a finger. That night, just as the city skyline outside my window sank into shadow and the walls of my apartment turned dark, my buzzer went off. The sound was harsh, insistent, vibrating through the quiet hallway like an alarm. I set down my glass and walked slowly to the intercom, half expecting it to be a neighbor complaining about the noise downstairs. But when I pressed the button, my brother's voice snapped through the crackling speaker. Open up, Tom. We need to talk. I froze, my hand hovering over the release button. My pulse kicked up, my mind racing through every possible scenario. But I had come too far to back down now. I pressed the button, leaving the door slightly ajar. The hinges groaned as I stepped back, crossing my arms, waiting. Moments later, he stormed inside. His face was flushed, his jaw tight, anger radiating off him in waves. His eyes flicked around my small, cluttered apartment, and I caught the way his nose wrinkled. The sagging couch. The stacks of old magazines. The crooked picture frames. He looked at it all as if it were beneath him, beneath me. He shut the door with a hard click and turned on me. His voice was low, sharp. What the hell's going on, Tom? I leaned against the wall, arms crossed, keeping my voice calm. I'm not sure what you mean. He barked a humorless laugh, dragging a hand through his perfectly styled hair. Don't play dumb. The cabin. The accounts. Mom's losing her mind. She's talking about hiring a lawyer. I shrugged, slow and deliberate. She can if she wants. But the cabin's in my name. Always has been. His face tightened, a muscle twitching in his jaw. That place is for the family, Tom. You can't just sell it out from under us. I met his stare, my voice cold. Funny. I don't remember anyone asking my opinion when you all used it for years without me. Nobody complained then. He stepped closer, fists clenched, and for a moment I thought he might actually swing. The tension was thick, heavy, vibrating in the air between us. But instead, he let out a low growl and turned away, pacing my living room like a caged animal. His eyes darted over every imperfection in my space, every reminder that I lived outside their polished, curated world. He spun back, his voice sharp and cutting. What do you want, Tom? Money? Is that it? Just name your price, and maybe we can work something out. I felt a slow, bitter smile spread across my face. You still don't get it, do you? This isn't about money. It's about respect. Something none of you have ever given me. He opened his mouth to argue, but I cut him off, my voice rising for the first time. You wrote me off a long time ago. Treated me like the family embarrassment, the failure. But you forgot one thing? He paused, eyes narrowing, the silence sharp enough to cut. I held his gaze, my voice steady. I still own a piece of this family. And I'm taking back what's mine. We stood there, locked in silence, the air between us stretched tight like a wire ready to snap. Finally, he broke. He muttered something under his breath, yanked the door open, and stormed out, the slam echoing through the apartment like a gunshot. I let out a slow breath, the adrenaline still buzzing in my veins. I poured myself another drink, the whiskey burning like fire down my throat. They wanted a black sheep? Fine. I'd show them exactly what it looked like. A week after my brother's little unannounced visit, the real chaos finally detonated. I woke up to a phone buzzing nonstop beside me, missed calls stacked one after another, frantic texts, and a handful of voicemails so rushed they barely made sense. It felt like my family's perfect little empire was finally starting to crumble, and my phone was the alarm bell. I rubbed the sleep from my eyes, scrolled through the messages, and the first one that caught my attention was from my sister. Mom's freaking out. Call me now. Then another, minutes later. What did you do? Dad's talking about cutting you off completely. Seriously, call me. I set the phone down on the counter as my coffee pot hissed and sputtered, filling the kitchen with that bitter, grounding aroma. And I smiled. I'd expected the backlash, the desperate scramble to glue their porcelain image back together, but I hadn't expected it to unravel this fast. As the coffee filled my mug, I opened my email. A new message from Dan. Cabin sale closed. Funds transferred. Nice chunk of change. Call me when you can. I leaned against the counter, sipping slowly, a satisfied grin spreading across my face. They hadn't even realized yet that it was gone. I hit play on the latest voicemail from my mother, her voice crackling with a strain I hadn't heard in years. Tom, this has gone far enough. I don't know what you're trying to prove, but this is ridiculous. The cabin is ours. It's for the family, and you had no right to sell it without talking to us. Call me back. Now. She sounded scared. Genuinely scared. And for the first time in my life, that fear wasn't mine, it was hers. I was just about to take another sip when the buzzer on my door went off. The harsh, angry sound echoed through my apartment like a warning siren. I froze mid-movement, my mug halfway to my lips. Setting it down carefully, I walked to the intercom and pressed the button. Yes, it's Dad, came the voice, deep and commanding even through the static. Open up. My thumb hovered over the release. I hadn't seen him in months, not since a suffocating Thanksgiving dinner where he'd spent the entire evening bragging about my brother's business deals and my sister's picture-perfect kids, barely acknowledging I was even at the table. But this confrontation? I'd been expecting it. almost craving it. I pressed the button. Moments later, the door creaked open, and there he was. My father. His eyes sharp, jaw set like stone. He stepped inside, his gaze sweeping over my cramped apartment, the mismatched furniture, the cluttered shelves, the pile of unopened mail on the counter. Every detail seemed to offend him, like my life itself was some kind of personal failure. He shut the door with a sharp click, the sound reverberating in the silence. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low, the tone of a man who had always believed he was in control. I leaned back against the wall, arms folded, calm. "All right? Talk." He stepped closer, his stare hard. "What the hell do you think you're doing? Selling the cabin? Closing the accounts? You've made a big mistake, Tom." I met his gaze without flinching. "No, Dad. The mistake was treating me like I didn't matter. Like I was just some screw-up you had to tolerate. I'm just correcting that." His jaw tightened, a muscle twitching in his cheek. "This is about money, isn't it? You want a bigger piece of the inheritance? Is that what this is?" A short, bitter laugh escaped me. "You still don't get it, do you? This isn't about money. It's about respect. Something I've never had from you. From any of you." The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. He stared at me, and for the first time in years, I watched his confidence falter. His shoulders sagged just slightly, his eyes dimmed. Finally, he exhaled and said quietly, almost bitterly, "All right. You've made your point." I straightened, my pulse quickening. "No, Dad. I'm just getting started." His face hardened, but he didn't respond. Instead, he turned, yanked the door open, and slammed it behind him, the sound echoing down the hallway like a final threat. I stood there in the silence, my own breathing loud in my ears. And then, slowly, a calm washed over me. A control I hadn't felt in years. When I walked back to the kitchen, my phone buzzed again, another text from my sister, another from my brother. But this time, their words were different. Short. Nervous. "Let's talk. We can work this out. Mom wants to apologize. Just call her." I lifted my mug, took another slow sip, and set it down with a soft clink. They had underestimated me for years. Written me off as the black sheep, the failure. But now? Now, for the first time, they were realizing the truth. If they wanted my respect, my cooperation, even my forgiveness, they were going to have to earn it.